Today, America is experiencing the worst economic climate since Jimmy Carter. Increased price rates, stagnant salaries, and to top it all off, many American families are finding it hard to keep up with rising expenses as inflation is at its highest level in 40 years. This is the height of stagflation. As a matter of fact, the average American family now spends $635 more every month on household expenses. In fact, the cost of groceries and gas is rising. In Louisiana, the typical family spends an additional $65 on food expenditures and $493 on fuel and energy costs per month. Many families are on the verge of financial disaster as a result of these rising monthly costs. Above all, lower-income households and elderly people on fixed salaries are the hardest hit. But why is America facing an economic doomsday? Before we go further, we'd love if you like, subscribe, and comment on No Cap Capitalist videos. Thanks! Now on with the video. Despite a reduction in the rate of inflation, Americans claim that the recent price hikes have put their families in financial difficulty. According to a poll conducted by Gallup, 61% of those surveyed believe that price hikes have put them in a difficult financial situation, up from 49% in January of last year. Since Gallup began recording the statistics in 2021, 61% represents a high peak for Americans. As inflation soars and a recession looms, 17% of Americans struggle to make ends meet, while 40% of Americans struggle to buy enough food for their families. In addition, most adults do not have any savings, and 41% of Americans do not have an emergency fund. In fact, the Experian Credit Agency reports that the average debt load in the United States heightened by 3.9% to $96,000 in 2021, a $3,644 spike. If you're still wondering how true this is, here are the 10 facts that American families are being crushed by rising cost pressures. Number 1. More than 1/3 of the whole full-time employed families in the US do not make enough money to meet most of their basic necessities, such as housing, food, and childcare. Nearly 40% report a fall in their financial health over the previous year. According to 38 Americans who said their financial lives had gotten worse over the previous 12 months, a new NPR and Maurice Paul report from March. The data, which show an 8-point increase since February, illustrate how quickly things are becoming worse for American families. Number 2. According to a recent analysis of 2011 data from the American Community Survey of the U.S. Census Bureau, an increasing amount of working families in the country lack access to economic stability. From 10.2 million in 2010 to 10.4 million in 2011, there were additional low-income working families than there were working families overall. The income gap between working families with low incomes and the wealthiest working families in the country is growing at the same time. Number 3. Today, Americans are paying more for essential household needs while receiving less in return. Many workers' salaries haven't been able to keep pace with inflation, and this has had a considerable negative impact on household purchasing power. Despite the fact that global events have contributed to an increase in petroleum and food costs, a wider variety of goods, such as housing and transportation, have also seen price hikes. These price hikes could become persistent if they're not addressed. Number 4. An increasing percentage of Americans are experiencing financial hardship as a result of inflation, unstable economic conditions, and lack of savings. A new CNBC Your Money Financial Confidence Survey conducted in collaboration with Monumentive discovered that 52% of American adults claim that their economic difficulty has gotten worse since before the COVID-19 pandemic, starting in March 2020. Approximately 70% of Americans currently admit to being stressed about how they spend their money. Rent, groceries, and utilities are now more expensive than they were a year ago. Nearly 60% of those surveyed identified inflation as the primary cause of their financial hardship. Only 13% of adults stated that they have high level of confidence in the banking sector in America. By the way, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Number 5. Families are feeling more financially forced as a result of rising costs and potential recession, according to a CNBC survey, which was carried out in collaboration with Monumentive. 58% of all Americans are currently living paycheck to paycheck. Adults who are having trouble making ends meet claim to feel significantly more stressed. They are twice as likely to worry about losing their jobs and 3 times more likely to think that having insufficient funds or credit card debt is a problem. According to MetLife's annual employee benefits trends research, stress has caused the overall financial health of American workers to decline to only 55%, down from 64% a year before. Number 6. Many Americans' wallets have suffered as a result of the global pandemic and the biggest yearly inflation in 40 years. A recent NerdWallet survey found that 2 out of 5 Americans believe that their overall financial standing is now worse than it was before the outbreak. The Harris Poll and NerdWallet surveyed more than 2,000 US adults online to find out how their financial situation has changed since the COVID-19 outbreak and what they're doing to combat rising costs. Along with these inquiries, there are numerous misconceptions regarding the US economy's current health, signs of recession, and the Fed's role in controlling inflation. Number 7. 1 in 4 American parents claim that there has been instances in the previous year where they have been unable to pay for the food for their family needed or to pay their rent or mortgage due to rising inflation rates. According to a recent Pew Research Center survey, 24% of respondents say that they've had difficulty making payments for the medical services their families needed, and 20% of the people who required childcare said that they haven't always had sufficient funds to cover the cost. Number 8. According to the poll, nearly 1 in 5 adults either lost their jobs or had their working hours slashed in March. Lower income individuals had the greatest job losses. In March, 39% of those with family incomes under $40,000 reported losing their jobs. According to the Fed, this compared to 13% of workers with household earnings above $100,000 and only 19% of those with salaries between $40,000 and $100,000. Higher earners and educated individuals performed better financially in general. In the final week of March, 53% of all employees worked part-time from home, while highly educated individuals were more likely to have that option. Number 9. According to the most recent Household Pulse survey results from the U.S. Census Bureau, 40 million Americans have trouble paying for household expenses, and a little over 25 million people report that they regularly don't have enough to eat. The survey's objectives are to gather information on household experiences with the global pandemic and its resurgence in the economy. The surveys were launched in April 2020 by the U.S. Census Bureau, which collaborated with other federal agencies in generating the data. According to the most current study, which was conducted from February 1st to February 13th, 16% of those polled thought it was extremely likely that they would be kicked out within the next 2 months. Number 10. More than ever, Americans are beginning to rely on credit cards. However, because of the persistently high pricing, they also have problems concluding payments on time. According to the New York Federal Reserve Bank's quarterly report on household debt, credit card balances rose by $61 billion to $986 billion in the last quarter of 2022, setting a record high. Prior to the pandemic, credit card balances reached a peak of $927 billion. The most recent figures show a significant reversal from results obtained 2 years ago when Americans were swiftly paying down their credit card debt using incentives that they had been given. In addition, despite the pandemic, they refrained from taking on further debt to cover expensive outlays like holidays. Overall, many U.S. families have experienced the terror of the current hyperinflation. From its peak at 9.1% in June 2022, when inflation was at its lowest point, the U.S. economy seems to have come a long way. In April, it dropped for the 10th consecutive month to 4.9%, but it doesn't mean that prices for necessities are returning to their pre-inflation levels, and this is stressing Americans' finances to the breaking point. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons. Most importantly, don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified when a new video is uploaded. Also, feel free to leave a remark if you have any recommendations for videos from No Cap Capitalist. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks once again.